everyone. It is, let's see what it is. The date is
July 26th.
July 26, 2017. Can you believe it? We're still here. So we're rocking and rolling. And our gay brethren and sisters got kicked out of the military this morning on a tweet. So, so anyway, what a complete abomination. Anyway, and and I was in the military, right? I was in the Army. I was a military policeman, and I had gay women and gay men that served with me. And this was when it was, totally legal, and they were just fine soldiers, and nobody cared. We just cared if you were a good soldier and did your job, and you were one of us, and we took care of you. We took care of our own, and that's the way it is. So anyway, it makes me really angry and sad. Not what I want to talk about, and I don't want to start off crying. So anyway, it took a long time to get that to happen, for gay people or transgender or whatever the word du jour is, to be accepted as full citizens, And if you are not considered worthy to pick up a rifle and defend your country because of the way God made you, and it's just horrible. I don't like it at all. So what I wanted to talk about, and maybe this is a good thing to talk about, is what is spiritual awakening. And Doug and I are writing this new book. It's called The Practice of Life, or The Life of Practice, working title. And it's, it's a lot of the things that I wrote about in Integral Recovery, a revolutionary approach to treating alcoholism and addiction, and the practice that we talk about here all the time. But when I was writing the book, I was very clear to me, this is not just for addicts, and alcoholics, for everyone. We all need to work on ourselves, and and it's been a passion of mine. I think Pam gets tired of me talking about it. Practice, practice, practice. And it is really the key to awakening. And creating and being happy and saving our planet and et cetera. It's just so essential. And we just never really figured it out until right now. We're starting to figure it out, and athletes practice and musicians practice and stuff like that, but we never put it together, all the essential things that you need to work on to become the best awakened, enlightened, giving, compassionate, creative, courageous version of yourself, and all your humanity too. It's all included in that. Yeah. We're not perfect, but we're perfect in our imperfection as we work on ourselves, right? And borrowing from Ken Wilber and some of the stuff that he's been writing about recently, is kind of one of the keys to our book. There's 4 parts. It's waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. Okay. So those are the things that we have to focus on, and that's what the book is about. And waking up basically means a spiritual awakening, and that's what I want to talk about. What do you mean when you talk about spiritual awakening? And growing up means doing your egoic work and doing everything it takes to grow up into a functional, not just a functional, but a highly functional adult who is performing and achieving in their relationships and their profession and the world at the highest level they're capable of, given all that we know now, and that's pretty darn high. Why? Because the solution to all the issues that are plaguing us right now is developmental. You get, the problem of slavery is dealt with, right? When you get to a certain developmental, the problem of homophobia is dealt with when you get to a certain developmental level. Obviously, our president is not there yet, but it's like, okay, so what? Who cares? My brothers and sisters, it's just a roll of the dice. Just like I was born, a white male, I could have been, a black gay female. I mean, I didn't have any choice about that as far as I know. And, and viva la difference, right? So just to see that creeping back in his, his tweet rants at 3 a.m. is just, anyway, I think it's a temporary blip and it's going to be gone soon. My words to God's, my lips to God's ears, or something like that, whatever that saying is. So, yeah, so those are things we have to deal with. And I'll stop referring to that tweet, hopefully. And, we have to wake up, we have to grow up, we have to clean up, Okay. And that means cleanup. What does that mean? Well, that can be physically, right? If you're doing a lot of drugs or doing stuff that are bad for your body, you have to, stop that stuff and clean up your physical body. But also it's about doing your emotional work, your depth work, dealing with the shadow and your traumas and all these things that often are pushed into the unconscious for very good reasons, that it helps us survive the trauma, right? But if we don't deal with it, if we don't process this, if we don't clean it up, it comes back and haunts us and causes us all kinds of grief and suffering. And then showing up. And that's when you've done the first three, when you wake up, when you grow up and you clean up, then you're in and it doesn't have to wait until you do that, because it's an ongoing process. I can't say, well, I took a bath, 5 years ago, I don't need another one. I mean, cleaning up is an ongoing process, right? But then you're ready. Then you're ready to give your gifts, right? You're ready to give back to the world and your unique expression. Who you are, whether it's, it's a big thing, you're a great writer, a great singer, great this, or you're just a really good parent, or a husband, or, or however your thing is in this life. Doesn't matter if it's big or small. There's this old Protestant hymn that I picked up somewhere along, at least the words on the tune, but it said, ready to go, ready to stay, ready my place to fill, ready for service, small or great, ready to do God's will. Some of the greatest saints and the biggest souls in the world are sweeping the streets and collecting our garbage and, and at the grocery store and, behind the counter and everything. So it's not about, how big or, important you are in the eyes of others. It's about really finding your path and doing what you're supposed to be doing. And there is such deep, authentic strength and joy and some suffering too. It's not always easy to get these things out. You have to struggle with it. I mean, we struggle with our gifts, right? To do good, to create, to write, to create, to read, to teach, to, be a mechanic, whatever it is, whatever job we're doing. So anyway, it's part of this bigger thing. But what is spiritual, waking up? And Ken Wilber, in his new book, The Future of Future of Religion, he talks about there's two things in spiritual, like two lines, which I think is really interesting. One is spiritual intelligence, which for the sake of that particular thing, he's talking about knowing some stuff about spirituality, knowing what's going on in the brain, knowing about the traditions, knowing about the different types of meditation and religions and esoteric paths from all over the place, and and the developmental stages and states of spiritual, all this stuff. So the ground. And my MA is in my master's degree is in transpersonal psychology. And I've been obsessed about this stuff for a long time. So I know in the spiritual intelligence thing, I know quite a bit, book learning, okay, which is great. There's nothing wrong with the intellect. It's a beautiful thing if it's used well. But on the other hand, then there's spiritual experience, where you start going, oh, that's what Rumi was talking about. In other words, you start having the experiences yourself. And I think both lines, because sometimes when you start having these spiritual experiences, and as in Pam's case, when she was very, 20, maybe, she had this big, huge spiritual non-dual opening, looking into a flower, which is beautiful. Wait for that to happen. And she says, am I crazy? Am I God? What does this mean? She didn't really have the background of the structure. And when it started happening, well, not really. Then I had my first big one when I was around 11. And I was flabbergasted. Yeah, flabbergasted. So it was like, and I was, growing up Catholic, and it didn't occur to me to go to a Catholic priest and say, Father, what in the heavens is going on here? I was reading Sermon on the Mount, and all of a sudden my mind got blown. And God is love, and he's everywhere, and he's in me, and he's in you, and everywhere else. And then what the heck does this mean? What does this mean? Never did. And so I kind of, wandered around in the wilderness, talking to my friends about it. And anyway, I've gotten in touch with some of those friends, and after all these years, they're all pretty devout Christians. So anyway, I must have been a little kid on fire. And they say, yeah, it was what you were talking to me about. So anyway, so what is waking up? And there's a lot of bunk. Okay. And there's a lot of harmful stereotypes and projections and ideas that have caused a lot of hurt, as in enlightenment. Okay. And enlightenment is like, you're just kind of cruising along, or you get hit by lightning, and so bing, you're enlightened. You get the meaning of life. You understand non-dual. Your ego is gone, and you're just a radiating light, and you can walk through walls, or you maybe not, but you can do all kinds of cool miracles, and you start a little, or a big ashram or a temple or this or that, and people come and they kind of feel your vibes, and hopefully they get, some charge out of that, or you channel this and that. And that ain't so much what happens. We do have spiritual awakenings. We do have spiritual openings, but we still have all our stuff. So at whatever, level of emotional and psychological development or trauma or happiness or dysfunction or function, wherever you go, whatever level you're at, when you have this kind of spiritual realization, that's what you have to hold the spiritual realization with. Now, I think the spiritual realization does some really good things. Okay. And Abraham Maslow was one of my big heroes, talked about, he started back in the 50s and 60s, and he was kind of the father of humanistic psychology. I think he coined the term transpersonal psychology, just a giant in the field. And he said, basically, we've been making our models of the human psyche by studying sick people, right? Psychiatrists working with their patients, they write about the unconscious, Freud and Jung, and not so much Jung, but a lot of it was based on just studying pathology to figure out what human beings are. He said, well, let's start looking at people who are really optimally functioning, that are really people that we can send as role model exemplars, what humanity can potentially be, heroes, if you will. And he started studying these, and he said one of the things that he found in almost all cases of these people that were really, really grooving, was that they had these spiritual experiences. He called them peak experience, to kind of secularize it and get away from the religious connotations. He said that once in their lives, at least once, or maybe sometimes more, there's these moments of just great clarity. Okay, like you're looking through the curtains, and you can just see maybe a couple of dark, see images in the front row, and all of a sudden the lights come on. Whoa! You can see the whole thing. And unfortunately, it's usually a state experience, which means it comes and goes, but then it closes again, and then you're kind of back where you were. But you have the memory of what you saw when this great shift of light, and that kind of changes everything. And that can also deeply influence things like depression, existential angst, despair, fear of death, fear of existence, fear of all these, these human sufferings. When you get this hit, because and somehow what's transmitted in these experiences, that everything is really, really, really incredibly good in a deep way that is deeper than your and mine, daily tragedies or existence, and that whole existential thing that the existentialists talked about so well. And that's like, wow, that shifts everything. But that's just the beginning, Jesus said, he said, except a man be born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. In other words, unless you have this rebirth experience, you can't see it, and enter the kingdom of heaven. We probably, I don't know what we would say, Dave, but we don't talk about kingdom so much, but we're losing the language of back then when they did have kings or emperors and of course, King James version. So you can't, unless you have this opening kind of rebirth experience, you can't enter the kingdom. But what happens when you're born? You're a little baby. You're an infant. There's new life. You're kind of glowing with the light from the world beyond when we come into the world, and then we start developing, in the developmental stages of human beings. But obviously, you say, "Oh, you're born." Next, it's just the first step. The awakening is the first step, and then you have to do a lot of stuff. In other words, to be worthy of the awakening. And not only do you have to do that, but you have to stay awake. Oh my God, it's not enough just to have, the people that say they were just blasted into this and they just stay there all the time. I'm not so sure about that. Never met anybody like that. We have our moments of great humanity and stuff like that. But I do believe that we can get to a much more stable state. Okay. And Dr. Roger Walsh said, let's just stop talking about enlightenment. Let's talk about spiritual maturity, which is nice. It means you have to grow into it. Okay. And there's a lot of work to be done. And I think a long time in our spiritual quest in the West, we kind of blew off, especially in Christianity, blew off contemplative practice, blew off, the experience of God, the Roman Empire. They weren't so didn't like all these mystics running around and channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirit and coming up all this stuff. They wanted to get it under one roof, consolidate it, stop being mystics, and just, we're going to write out the dogma, the Apostles' Creed, or whatever it is. And you have to memorize this. And if you step beyond this and your belief system or experience, then you're apostate, and we can do away with you, because we need this to bring our fractured empire together. And it looks like this is a pretty good way to do it. So there was a lot of things in there. And so even though there were a lot of monasteries, sometimes the monasteries lost their contemplative tradition. I mean, you can go to monasteries today and there's nothing going on very much spiritually. It's kind of weird. Most of it's happening outside of monasteries today. And so we lost that, and we became Christianity became a largely dogmatic, or largely a head trip with very little, spiritual awakening. I said there's an exception to the rule. I think the Quakers are pretty cool. And they really they kept and have stayed with the traditional Quakers anyway, the ones that sit in silence together. They have a very rich interior practice that they've carried forward for centuries, and they've been really great people. They are always been on the side of angels almost all the time. Anti-slavery, pro-civil rights, ecology, women's rights, gay rights, animal rights. Everybody, needs rights. The Quakers have always been there, not just giving it lip service, actually doing it. They won Nobel Peace Prize as an organization, the Friends Service Committee, I think it called. For helping rebuild Europe after World War II. I mean, just, people are really walking the talk there, and they deserve a lot of admiration. And if you go and read the literature, they're really smart people, and they all journal, and they communicate, and they really talk about this interior life. It's a very, very rich kind of Western mystical tradition that not too many of us know about. But if you run into them, they're really sweet. They're kind of a little bit nerdy, but they're really compassionate, and I just love them. Anyway, so yeah, so we do have to wake up, and waking up is when you kind of realize finally who and what you really are, and always have been, and in those moments when we tap into that, it's more real than our walk around world. It's very, very powerful. And I was getting back to Maslow. He said we had to have these experiences. If we don't have these experiences of waking up, these peak experiences, these mystical experiences, these awakening experiences, we're just going to stumble around in the dark, and it's going to be really painful. And I think a lot of us have had these experiences just by being human. It's our birthright. When we were kids, when we were in our early 20s, and we had these moments, whether it was on LSD, whether it was swimming, whether it was walking in the woods or playing sports. I mean, there's a lot of ways these things can happen, but we didn't have a lot of support. What do you do with this stuff? So we just kind of keep it to ourselves and go, wow, but when you talk about this to a lot of people, a lot of people can really relate because they've already had the experience, and often they say in these awakening moments that it's there's often a quality of, oh wow, I didn't know that. It's like, oh wow, I knew that. Somehow I forgot that. I fell asleep. Somehow I know this stuff at my deepest level. So, which is really cool, because the deeper you go and the more you tap into this, and I can say the higher, deeper. I just use deep as a metaphor because it seems when I meditate, I go from my head down into my heart, into the lower parts of my body, and that's kind of the physical map I use. So when we go deeper, we find this, and we find that there's an inner voice of wisdom, and there's an angels, or there's a guru, we're our own guru. There's an enlightened being within us. If we can, dig through the egoic and historical and genealogical and cultural archaeology, all the stuff dumped there, and all the warning, don't go there, all the fears and all the dragons that are actually become our aids and support if we deal with them right. When we get down to the bam, okay, I'm home, okay. And so then, of course, we have to stay awake. And I'm, one of my great gifts is being a depressive. I have to deal with I'm great at absorbing suffering and pain and darkness. So I have to have a ongoing interior practice where I can keep dealing with that stuff and, blessing it and transmuting it and saying, what is you're already trying to teach me now, teacher? And hopefully the message of that is compassion, right? Because we have to have compassion for our own suffering. Our kind of higher self has to, compassione comes from the Latin, means to suffer with. Our higher self can be with all our individual suffering and hold it in great love and compassion and openness. Okay. And that same deep self that begins to emerge can also hold the suffering and the pain of the whole darn planet or multi-universes. It's huge. Our deepest self, the deepest reality that we find in our practices is infinite. It's beyond time. It's, not only infinite in that it's forever and ever. It's like time it transcends time. Time comes from, the infinite, comes from the deep self, comes from God, if you will, whatever language you're comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with any of it, as you go on, you begin to, deal with the language. God was a big, nasty word for me for a long time. And then I kind of got it. Oh yeah, well, a lot of the crap that I was handed, I can't blame that on God. That was just stuff. So, I'm comfortable with that, or higher power, or great spirit, or great mystery, or, it doesn't matter. It's a rose by any other name is just as sweet, right? As Shakespeare said. So yeah. And as we begin to relax into our interiors, we begin to become in touch with the hunger of our hearts for waking up, for God, for spirit, for ultimate reality, for connection, and lots of things, ultimate meaning and purpose. And a lot of the fear of dying and fear of existing and all that stuff could really be ameliorated by this experience. And the iAwake technologies are so useful in that, because it was created by a bunch of mystics who were working on this stuff, and and transpersonal psychologists and integralists that kind of had an understanding of what was going on. And when I started going into the non-dual myself, I was really versed in it. I knew maybe I thought a part of me said, "Are you psychotic?" But most of me knew that this is a natural progression, and this is basically grace, that this is happening to you now. So that's kind of what's waking up. And if Doug, if you'd like to feed off of that or riff off of that, or anybody else, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I think that those experiences are certainly our birthright, and the religions in the West, at least in the past, historically have kept such tight reins on them, because it is tremendously empowering to have that kind of realization. And when you're looking to control people and dictate morals and do things, it's dangerous to let people realize who and what they truly are, and that we don't need that kind of intermediary. And so for a long time, we have inherited a sort of cultural dictum that we're not supposed to explore those things, especially as we moved into modernism and a reliance on science as the ultimate God, which can be a form of religion in and of itself. Then people who look to spiritual pursuits, historically at least, and I think this is starting to change, were kind of looked down upon or looked sideways at as being a little bit out there. Consequently, a lot of people have those kind of opening experiences, like John, the experience that you had when you were young, and don't have any context to understand them, or even realize that it's anything other than just a good memory or an experience they had one day. They don't realize that there's anything spiritual or mystical about it. I recall one time I was around that same age, 10, 11, 12 years old, and I had a peak experience. I was at summer camp doing an incredibly challenging hike that a counselor took most of the people back down on. Most people weren't keen to continue, but a counselor turned back with them, and others of us continued on. And as we were up there, it started to rain as we walked all the way up to, they called it Fifth Peak. And I remember reaching that summit, feeling the rain down on my face, looking out at everything around me, feeling the connectedness with everything I saw as I looked down on this valley. And I will never forget the experience of that, but I didn't connect it to anything spiritual until much, much later. Even after I began to study spirituality and waking up, I didn't connect the experience because I didn't understand what that was. I fell into the trap of reading and studying and learning a lot about meditation and about awakening and about enlightenment, and not recognizing those experiences in myself. That was the first of several kind of similar peak experiences. And we're fortunate here to have a community that is interested in exploring and discussing those kind of things, because the support that we give each other and the context for relating those experiences and seeing how to bring the lessons of them into our daily lives is so essential. Otherwise, waking up is, like you said earlier, just a state experience that you forget and may not know too much about. But having that realization that you are connected, that you are one with everything there, is something that naturally tends to elevate the way you approach the world. When you realize that I'm the same with everybody else, it's harder to stay angry at people. It's harder to judge people, especially for circumstances beyond their control. You are more inclined to help because you realize at some level that you're helping yourself, that easing your suffering eases my suffering and eases all of our suffering. And that's a beautiful place to get to.
Yeah, and one of the qualities of these non-dual or this, you're one with everything type experiences, it's really good. It could be, oh, I'm just one with the horror, and the existential voidness and the nothingness of everything. Well, that's not the experience at all. It's like there's this thing. It's like, oh my God. Literally often in our culture for a second, oh my God, you go, God? Wow. This is just, and you just weep. And there's this profound peace and joy at the perfection and the beauty of it all, even though, it's not about your mind, looking at the data. It's just this profound knowing, and great peace and great joy comes out of that experience. It's really mind blowing, as we used to say in the 60s. And I think we carried on until today.
And it takes some work to remember, especially as, you mentioned being a depressive earlier, and, I certainly have my own challenges and drama. Transcending that in the moments that it's hardest is the moment that it's also most necessary. It takes the work and you least want to do it, but that's when it makes the biggest difference to remember that connection and get back to that place. And again, that's why it's so important to have the context to understand your waking up experience. Yeah. And I don't necessarily mean understanding in any kind of academic sense, but understand it with people who have experienced the same thing and hear the realizations that you are not alone with this.
Academic writing has a great gift of taking one of the most wonderful things in the world and making it absolutely boring and dry and awful. Anyway, you're right. So anybody have any, I didn't want to cut you off, Doug, but anybody have any questions or comments about this thing that kind of percolated here?
Yep. If anybody has any questions or would like to discuss, you can feel free to jump on the video here or open up your microphone by clicking the mute button. Just ask you to remember that this is going to be posted on YouTube. So if you don't want your face to be seen or your voice, then you can type your questions in the chat.
Hey, Doug, John, everybody.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, I really like Doug's story about experience you had when you were young. I've had experiences like that at music festivals, and then also on LSD as well, being in nature with no one else around and just feeling connected to everything and being able to see everything. The weird thing is, like, think of your eye perception. You could only see your front view. It felt like I could see 360 degrees, and it was amazing. It was so cool, and I could talk to lizards too, but that's a whole nother thing.
No, it's always good.
Just wanted to share that it's nice to have those experiences, and it'd be cool if those could carry over, like every single day, that remembrance. Yeah. That way one wouldn't go back to the, using substances or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've actually considered doing another trip with mushrooms, because I remember how therapeutic that was and reminding me of all the things that are important and all the bad habits I don't like that I do. And and trying to remember that experience as well.
Yeah, and I do think there's a place for psychedelics, but be careful in early recovery, because sometimes we just want to go back to using substances to get the work done. But I think it's really, really important that you establish a practice, right? A deep interior practice before you go back to that particular one again, because they're very powerful. And I've talked about this with shamans and a lot of people, and it's like you really have to have a strong established practice before you do this stuff, and keep on doing it, and then you can integrate, and it can be a useful experience. Whereas without that kind of holding, it can really be destructive sometimes even. So make sure, this is really, really powerful stuff, powerful medicine, and should be done with a lot of support, with people who know what they're doing. And I said, really get your practice going. And, and I remember talking to you last week, and after we finished the program, I was like, oh my God, I should have told them something. When I was, and I still do this, when I was just beginning to work with this technology, and it'll be on 9/11 in September, it will be my 12th year anniversary of doing this, meditating every day with this stuff. And if you are going through a thing like your cravings are coming on, or depression, or you're getting the fuckets, there's in my book, I say, I might have cleaned it up, but I said, every relapse begins with the fuckets. Get angry, and it's just too hard, and I should feel happy all the time, and fuck it, But anyway, when that starts coming on, a really good thing is grab PMP 3.0 and do level 1 and level 2, or level 2 and level 3 in 2 hours. Just sit there, because it's really important. And, in the beginning, it might be really painful, because a lot of the stuff it's making you, want to get the efforts and use again will come up right in your face. And then you just stay with it, with the witness, and let it do its thing in your body, and just be there, prayerfully, consciously, awarely, mindfully, and let it go through your body. And you will go through it, and it will lift, and you'll get through it. And it's just like, oh, wow, thank you. And, with my clients, when I was doing clients, we were online, basically, a lot of times the depression or this, I said, well, go meditate for 2 hours and call me in the morning, and very often I would just get, yeah, got it. Thank you. Didn't even discuss it. It was just a kind of extended period. And that's a really, a very smart tip for using this technology, because you really want to work up to your daily practice. And I would say an hour a day, if you can work with that, at the end of the week, you got 7 hours in, that's pretty good, and if you can do a little better than that, that's cool too, depending on what you need. But sometimes just having these kind of marathon, and this more is more, you'll notice around 40 minutes into it, or an hour into it, an hour and 10 minutes into it, hour and a half, man, it started getting deep. My friends and neighbors, it's like, whoa, my mind has shut up. And I'm there. I'm in this, and then all kinds of very, very cool, interesting things can happen that are very good for your psyche, for your ego, for your soul, for your body, for your mind, for your joy and your peace and your path. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there, that you can actually use that as a tool when you start, and especially, when you're in early recovery, man, you really got to just focus on this stuff and work on it with great dedication, heroically, because it's a very sensitive time, very important time.
And like you said, when I feel like I don't want to do it, that just means I need to do it even more.
Ain't that the truth? Yes, that's my game I play with my ego, and it goes, there must be something you're really avoiding, so we're going to meditate. Oh, rats. Then it finally goes, okay, I got it, thanks. But yeah, that's the mind plays interesting games. And, and there's that addict part of you that wants just to get you messed up and wants you to die, and it's always kind of, slipping in there. And the more that we do the inner work, the more that we kind of disempower that part of us, and we become very mindful of it. When it comes up and goes, don't you want to go in a bar and just like, have a couple of shots and see if there's any coke? Well, thanks for sharing. You'll feel really good. No, I know what's going to happen. Anyway, so there's always that part. There's these kind of voice dialogue things can go along. And as you guys have probably heard me tell the story about the good dog and the bad dog. And have you heard? Do you know that one?
About which one you feed?
Yeah, that one. So yeah, and so as you keep feeding, thank you. So I don't have to tell the whole story again. Yeah, so when you really get into understanding that and feeding the good dog every day, the big dog's going to get stronger, and he's going to be able to take care of the bad dog until he just becomes a grumpy puppy, And you go, thank you. You really taught me a lot. I needed that to break through, to where I am. But, you honor it, you honor the disease, you honor the suffering, because it really is what gets us on the path and gets most of us serious about doing the work.
Yeah, one of the things that was helpful for me too was learning how to redirect my feelings about feeling bad. I too began almost every time with the case of the fuckets, and I learned how to redirect that positively to, yeah, I don't feel the way I want to right now, but that's okay. I gave myself permission to feel like crap, and just in doing that, there was a release. There was a letting go in saying it's okay for me to feel this way. It's okay for me to not be happy right now. It's okay for me to not feel well, and there's something in that. I channeled that same thing into helping my writing and my music too. This may not be the best piece of content I've ever written. This may not be the best song I've ever played, but screw it. That's fine. I'm going to do it anyway. There's a loosening in that allows for freedom. At least in my experience, it's been tremendously powerful.
Yeah, and one of the things about depression and about addiction, as you get down deep into the darkness and the suffering, you feel so isolated and lonely, like you're cut off from everything and everyone. And if you just, as Doug was saying, if you just, allow yourself to be present with it, one of the things that the realizations that came to me is like, do you think you're the only one in the world that's suffering right now? And I'm like, oh, of course not. And maybe some of the other suffering is so much more that I'm experiencing right now. And it just kind of opened my heart up in compassion. Again, compassion to suffer with. And you go, wow, it's not just about me. What is here for me to learn when I'm in this place of grief and sorrow and isolation and darkness and, all of that stuff. And there's tons to learn. And it can be so turned into wisdom and goodness and strength and compassion if we just are able to hold it, hold it in love, hold it in wisdom, hold it in compassion, hold it in this expanded self that we all are.
I had to learn how to look too. I personally was so detached from what was going on in the rest of myself that I had to learn how to spot that stuff. I didn't know what I was feeling or where I was feeling it. I just knew that I couldn't be present with what was going on until I let myself to. So, first, the realization that you develop through the practice when you're feeling good and want to do it, you build the skills that help you recognize the things that are keeping you from it when you don't want to. And it kind of starts the snowball rolling downhill one little bit at a time.
Yeah, and a phrase I read recently, numb to numbness. You're so numb you don't know you're numb. I was like, oh my God, I'm numbed out, man. I'm just completely armored. What the hell is going on here? And that's what's going on here. There's a lot of stuff to deal with, and usually in our practice, there's kind of a wisdom to it, that you won't get too much at one time, or you may get seemingly overwhelmed and crushed by it all, or broken by it at least. But yeah, that you start beginning to, the wiser part of yourself begins to speak, and that this is exactly what you have to do. You have to be with this thing, And again, I'm quoting a lot of gospel today, but Jesus said, if the rock falls on you, if you fall on the rock, it'll break you. But if the rock, falls on you, it'll grind you to dust. So you're gonna have to do the work anyway. It's gonna come out some way. If we don't deal with this stuff, the pain and suffering, it'll eventually kill us. Or it can be the thing that helps us become the raw materials for our awakening and for our path and for our service and growing up.
And in addition to your, formal daily practice and the time that we're spending listening to PMP and doing that, for me, it's in the morning usually, but we can also bring these tools with us into our daily lives. Hopefully if you guys have iAwake tracks, you're putting them on your smartphone so that you have it wherever you are when you need it. But in that situation, you're not always going to be there with your chair in your room and your meditation cushion or whatever it is that you use, your perfect headphones. So use what you have. And I found that when I feel out of balance, when I feel off center, when something gets screwy, even stopping for a single conscious breath, which you can do wherever you are, is enough to reset me. A lot of times it makes a huge difference. And just that pause. This is kind of funny. I learned from an episode of Sesame Street recently. They were parodying Star Wars, and they said, use the fours. Count to four. You feel like crap, use the fours. I love it. So
nice. Yeah, and when you become practice centric, after a while, when you travel, it's like, I got all squared away, man. I got at least 2 or 3, headphones and a couple of earbuds or something, so if one goes down, I have the other. I have my iPods, 2 iPods, smartphone, and my laptop. That's usually all things I can use to do my meditation with, and I'll find out, what's going on. Are there tennis courts around? Are there gyms? Are there yoga studios? Are there beaches I can go running on? I mean, it just goes without, it's just what I do. Just like you have, check the airline schedule, or go to MapQuest and figure out, which way to go, driving across country, et cetera. So it just becomes more and more, just like if you're an addict, right? You don't go, well, I'm going to New York. I have no idea. I don't have any drugs and I don't know where to get them in New York, but I'm going to go anyway. An addict would never do that. They go, well, I've got to have a stash with me. And if I'm going to be along, I have to start making contacts and find out where I can get more fixes or get more, whatever a thing, you're doing. So just as yeah, so you're and Doug is writing about this, but you're changing old bad habits, negative habits, and replacing them with good habits, life enhancing habits.
I think too, and John, you mentioned having your smartphone with you to see what's going on around you. I'm kind of having a thought quite a bit lately. My big internal rant these days is about proper use of technology and the way technology is changing our brains when we use it irresponsibly. An overabundance of information, a wealth of information leads to a poverty of attention, and it hinders our ability to pay attention to those things that are going on inside. There are other things about, say, self-esteem effects of social media based on the things that people choose to share or not share, and the wrong perceptions we form.
Can be so nasty on these things. It's unbelievable.
On a much more fundamental level, the novelty of clicking new link all the time, scrolling down your feed looking for the next cute cat picture or article that's going to piss you off, or whatever it is that gives you these intermittent reward dopamine hits, is just like the addicted brain. And so consciously changing our relationship to smartphones in particular, which are with us wherever we go, allows us to pay more attention to what's going on, to retrain our brains and rebuild those atrophied neural pathways of our attentional circuits to notice what's going on in our bodies and our emotional life in the first place. In addition to being able to kind of read more intuitively into what's going on with the others around us, to pay more attention to body language and be present with folks. It's just a tremendously important thing.
Yeah, and it's really difficult to find that balance, But I know all of us. I mean, a lot of people that I know and myself, we have to go on fast from the news media. I just can't freaking deal with the daily insanity for a while. And then again, you don't just, well, I don't watch the news and everything. I just want to live in my own little bubble. And, I mean, you kind of do have to be informed, think globally. What was it? Think globally, act locally, all that good stuff. You do have to, and if good people just, sit by and do nothing, when injustices happen, it's not so great, so it's important to be informed, but it's also important to hold that in a balance, that it doesn't become a prison, it doesn't crush you, it doesn't become an addiction, but becomes part of being awake and responsible in the world. Yeah, and I mean, God, you leave your smartphone at home, and immediately, it's like I notice it, and I'm not I'm not a big Facebook guy or a big Twitter or any of this stuff, but it's like I'm not connected to my wife. It's like this is how we do our thing. It's like this new. It's like a whole new. Sense. It's just like your eyes. If you left your eyeballs at home, it would be very apparent when you walked out the door, like, hey, I can't see anything. It's almost like that with this technology. And so hopefully, that we'll be able to find ways of making it good, because, it is out of the bag, baby. Pandora's box has been opened, and it ain't going back, and it ain't going back in the box anytime soon. So how can these things become tools for expansion, consciousness, connection, realizing we're not alone in the world? And yeah, I guess we got to wake up and stay awake, huh?
Connection itself, I think, is an important spiritual technology, like what we're doing here in this meeting. This is a beautiful use of technology to bring about this other connection technology. If I may, with one more quick anecdote here, when I was doing a lot of work in the acting world and being an extra on set and stuff, I did not start out with a smartphone. I just had my regular old cell phone, and I showed up at my first day and was sitting around off stage with everybody else. And as we were all waiting, getting ready to get into our costumes and get ready to go on set, everybody else is sitting there with their noses buried in their smartphones, looking around. Nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's connecting. And it was quiet. Everybody just absorbed in their own little world. I didn't really know what was going on and felt kind of cold about the whole thing, even though the job was certainly fun. But I have been on plenty of other sets since then where you're not allowed to bring your phones with you. They actually take them because they're so worried about things, photos especially, being leaked out online and shared unofficially. So they collect your phones at the beginning of the day. And the groups that I have met on those days when no one has their smartphones bonded almost instantly. We had so much fun, so many things to talk about, so many things to share. And it's kind of mind-blowing the difference it makes to have that tool removed from you. There's something I read about recently called the iPhone effect, that even having a smartphone out on a table can diminish the quality of interaction between two people, whether you're checking it or not. Just having it in sight is enough. So put your smartphones away, pay attention to yourself and the people around you.
Me and my dog Lucy, we go out in the wilderness every day. I live in a big wilderness area. It's very beautiful. You'll probably seeing some pictures of those soon. And a lot of these areas, you just don't have any connection. I mean, you don't have any, you can take pictures or whatever, but you can't do any, live contact or get the latest news feeds or anything like that. So it's really nice to get to, up on the mountain or in that canyon or out on this particular plains or something where when there is no internet connection or that your smartphone is like not connected. It's a nice thing, but it feels weird. We're very habituated to these things. And, you look at kids that have grown up with them, it's like my nieces and whatnot. They're just like, they got, thumbs that operate at the speed of light. I mean, it's really remarkable to see, and to see what's going to happen. What's going to happen to kids that have grown up with all this stuff. And you look back movies in the 90s and stuff, and they look like us. They wear the hair the same, have the same clothes, eating the same food, but not everybody's going, sitting in a restaurant or standing in line or doing anything, or, people walking into cars in the middle of the street with their noses stuck. So anyway, it's a brave new world.
I mean, at its heart, waking up requires being present. That's with attention or awareness or both. And it's hard to do unless we practice it. So, yeah. Being present, whether in your meditation practice or in your daily life, is a really essential part of that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, Doug, we've never been in the same room together. Mm-hmm. This has all been a long distance relationship, and it's becoming a very important relationship and a very intimate relationship. We're going to see each other in October when we go to the Trans Tech conference in Palo Alto. That'll be wonderful. It can't replace it. But I have lots of friends that I've had clients that I haven't been on the same continent with before. And so, and I love these people, and it's very interesting. And I'm pretty much an introvert, and I kind of tend to isolate and get left to my own devices. Like I was at the local park here, and I was talking to this woman, says, "Wow, are you from here?" He goes, "Yes, I'm from Teesdale." And she said, "How long have you been here?" "About 25 years. "Really, where do you live?" "About a half a block from you." I was like, "Oh God, John, you're just pathetic." And Pam, she's much more social, and she drags me into connecting more with people, which is really good. I'm really blessed by it. We tend to find lots of fulfillment and learning and light from areas that we tend to want to neglect, and we push ourselves into. It's like, wow, that neglected aspect becomes an area of great potential, great growth, and great joy. And not always, but a lot of times. So any other comments or questions? We're getting about time to wrap this up. Thank you for putting up with us and these conversations. Appreciate it. Oh, by the way, we're going on vacation in August. Unlike Freud, they'd leave for 3 months. We're going to be actually, I'm going to be writing a book, so it's not going to be a total thing, but we're not going to be doing this for the month of August, the teleseminar. So, however, when we get back, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna put out if anybody. Well, I guess I'll let you follow up after I say this because it's connected. But I was gonna say if anyone has any ideas for topics that they would like us to get into some more detail on, explore and really develop some good talks around for when we come back from the break, then go ahead and send them to us on the iAwake contact page, and I'll make sure we get those and have some good stuff for you when we get back.
Yeah, and so we're going to shift this thing into a podcast when we get back in September. And we've been doing go check out the Journey of Integral Recovery podcast on iTunes. It's me, Doug, and Dr. Bob Weathers, and we just have a fantastic time. And so anyway, we're going to do that. So know that, because it's been very successful, and lots of people are downloading this thing. It's really expanded our ability, to reach out. And so we want to do it with this thing. And now that we have Brother Doug here, who is, really good with the technology, it's not that hard if you have people who know what they're doing. Newsflash. Anyway,
most of the time.
I'll tweet that to Trump. It's not so hard if you knew what you're doing, right? So anyway, let's not talk about him. So anything else before we sign off here?
I think that's all for me. Had a wonderful conversation. Glad everyone was here today.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really a high point of my week to be here and share with you, Doug, and with everybody else. So thank you so much. And we'll be back next month. Uber month. Okay. God bless.